So what are entities and relationships? Entity can be a real world object, either tangible or intangible, that can be easily identifiable. For example, in college database, students, professors, workers, departments, and projects can be referred to as entities. Each entity has some associated properties that provide it an identity. Now, relationships are basically links between entities that have something to do with each other. For example, the employees table in a company's database can be associated with the salary table in the same database, right? So list the different types of relationships in SQL. So we have one-to-one. That is, this can be defined as a relationship between two tables where each record in one table is associated with the maximum of one record, in another table. One-to-many and many-to-one, most commonly used where in relationship where a record in a table is associated with multiple records in the other table. Now, many-to-many used in cases when multiple instances on both sides are needed for defining a relationship, and self-referencing is basically when a table needs to define a relationship with itself, right? Now, what is an alias? Basically, it is a feature in SQL that's supported by most, if not all, RDBMSs. It's a temporary name assigned to the table or table column for the purpose of particular SQL query. Aliasing can be employed as an obfuscation technique to secure the real names of database feeds. A table alias is also known as a correlation name. So it is represented explicitly by the as keyword, but in some cases the same can be performed without it as well. Nevertheless, using the as keyword is always a good practice. Select a.emp as employee, alias using as keyword, b.emp as supervisor from employee A, employee B, where a.employee sub is equal to b.employee ID. Right? Now, what is a view? View is basically it is a virtual table based on result set of an SQL statement. It contains rows and columns just like a real table. The fields in a view are fields from one or more real tables in the database. So table A, table B, we query it to get a view, right? And what is normalization? It basically represents the way of organizing structured data in the database. It includes the creation of tables, establishing relationships between them, defining rules for those relationships. Inconsistency and redundancy can be kept in check based on these rules, hence adding flexibility to the database. Now, denormalization is the inverse process of normalization, where normalized schema is converted into a schema that has redundant information. Performance is improved by using redundancy and keeping the redundant data consistent. The reason for performing denormalization is the overhead produced in the query processor by an over-normalized structure. Now, what are the various forms of normalization? So, basically, normal forms are used to eliminate or reduce redundancy in database tables. Different forms are first normal form, 1NF. Relation in the first normal form, it is in 1NF form if every attribute in the relation is single valued. If a relation contains a composite or multivalued attribute, it validates the first normal form. For example, we have the students table, right? Each student in the table has a name, address, and the books they issued from the public library. Student address, books issued, and citation. As we can observe, the books issued field has more than one value per record. Books issued has more than one value, right? That is multi-valued attribute. And to convert it into one normal form, this has to be resolved into separate individual records for each book issued. So this is now to get the 1NF form, we basically have the name repeated twice, but now the rows we have separated them, and only one book is coming per row, right? So basically now this is converted from multi-valued attribute in a particular column to getting a single valued attribute, right? So that is 1NF. And now second normal form is a relation, basically if it satisfies the conditions of the first normal form and doesn't contain any partial dependency. A relation in 2NF has no partial dependency, that is, it has no non-prime attribute that depends on any proper subset of any candidate key of the table. Often specifying a single column primary key is the solution to the problem. For example, in the above example, we can observe the students table in the 1NF form has a candidate key in the form of student address that can uniquely identify all records in the table. The field books issued non-prime attribute depends partially on the student field, hence the table is not in 2NF. To convert it into second normal form, we will partition the tables into two while specifying a new primary key attribute to identify the individual records in the students table. Foreign key constraint will be set to the other table to ensure referential integrity, right? So this is the second normal form of the students table and the books table, right? And yeah, that's it. Now talking about what are truncate, delete, and drop statements. So delete statement is used to delete rows from a table. Delete from candidates where candidate ID greater than 1000, right? Now it's basically just used to delete the rows. Truncate is used to delete all the rows from the table and free the space containing the table. So truncate table candidates, delete all the rows from table and free the space containing that table. And drop command is used to remove an object from the database. If you drop a table, all the rows in the table are deleted and the table structure is removed from the database. Right? If you drop a table, all rows in table are deleted and table structure removed from the database itself. Right? Drop table candidates. Okay. Now difference between drop and truncate, very important. Okay. So if the value is dropped, all things associated with the tables are dropped as well. This includes the relationships defined on the table with other tables, the integrity checks and constraints, access privileges, and other grants that the table has. To create and use the table again in its original form, all these relations, checks, constraints, privileges, and relationships need to be redefined. However, if a table is truncated, none of the above problems exist and the table retains its original structure. Now, what's the difference between delete and truncate? So the truncate command is used to delete all rows from the table and free the space containing the table, as we already saw. Delete command deletes only the rows from the table based on the condition that we give it, right, in the where clause, or deletes all the rows from the table if no condition specified. But it does not free the space containing the table. That is the most important part, that truncate would, while deleting all the rows, it would also free the space containing the table. But with delete, it would not free the space containing the table. Now, what are aggregate and scalar functions? So an aggregate function performs operations on a collection of values to return a single scalar value. Aggregate functions are often used by using the group by and having clauses of the select statement. So some SQL aggregate functions which are commonly used are average, which gets the mean or the average of the values, count to count the total number of records in a specific table of view, min to get the minimum of values, then max, then sum, first and last. First fetches the first element in the collection of values and last fetches the last one. Now all aggregate functions described above ignore null values except for the count function. So count function would take the null values also into account. Okay. Now a scalar function is basically, it returns a single value based on the input value, right? So len calculates the total length of the given field. Single value in the based on the input value. Ucase converts a collection of string values to uppercase. Characters converts a collection to lowercase L case. Mid basically extracts substrings from a collection of string values in a table, right? Concat concatenates two or more strings. Rand basically generates a random collection of numbers of a given length. Round collects the basically calculates the round of integer value for a numeric field or decimal point values. Now returns the current date and time. Format sets the format to display a collection of values, right? Yeah, so that